Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Katarina. Thank you so much for watching this video today. I'm going to be sharing something very different I've never done before. Lately, I like to challenge myself not only to new techniques but also to new projects as well, ones that I wanted to but never got to do before. So today I'm going to share 3 ATC cards for my very first ATC swap. I got paired up in a challenge on Craft World website where the challenge is for autumn September. It has to be autumn themed. The ATC cards measurements are 2.5 by 3.5 inches, and we were asked to use some of our scraps, which I have plenty of. These are just some out one of my drawers, which I plan to use. And I'm going to be using the Papercraft Society Box 48 stamps and also some of those foliage dies. And I also have this stamp set from an older Simply Cards and Papercraft magazine. I'm going to be using the 2 berry branches and some of the sentiments from this stamp set. I already have stamped and colored in some of these images from both stamp sets, the Papercraft Society Box and one of that older magazine, and I used watercoloring to color these in, and these are just looking gorgeous. The mushrooms I colored in 2 different ways, some of them I red ones, some of them brine, and the watercolor pencils that I used are some of these Stabilo ones, and I also have this other set in my stash. These are the 2 sets that I love using. They have different shades of the certain colors, so I just like to mix match them. Now this stamp here is gorgeous, but I've cut it out with the matching die and it's not left me with much of the white around it, while the other ones Fussy Cut have all the white edge, so I decided to use those only for my 3 projects today. For my first ATC card, I'm using a yellow card base, which measures 2.5 by 3.5 inches, and I will be using the stamps from Luke Collins's Papercraft Society Box, and I'm picking out the 3 foliage stamps there is. The 3 colors that I'm using from the Hunky Dory ink range are Tiger Orange, Mustard, and Pear Green. And I'm just loading these up on my acrylic block, and I am just adding them randomly on this piece of cardstock. I'm not really paying attention what goes where leaves are falling. So I'm just going to use the different colors for the different stamps, and I'm just going to stamp them all over this piece of cardstock. So this is the mustardy color, and for the last one I'm going to use the pear green, which is much lighter than these 2, but I think it adds a lovely contrast. I really love this combination. When I was playing about with colors, I really liked that there. It barely shows here on the camera, but in real life it is there, and it looks gorgeous. It's not too overcrowded now because it looks like it's in the background. I love how it turned out. However, was missing something for me, so I decided to rough up the edges of this cardstock with my scissors, and I'm gonna come back with the same color I used on one of those leaves, and it is the mustard color. It adds that lovely brownish yellowish edging to it all. Now a little close up. It's perfect. Before decorating my ATC cards, I decided to create all my backgrounds first. So this one is heavyweight white cardstock cut down to 2.5 by 3.5 inches for my second ATC base. And I've cut out some leaves from copper and from gold mirror cardstock using the dies from the Papercraft Society Box 48. I'm going to heat emboss these using my ink, embossing ink, which is just a clear sticky ink. And what I'm using, Pider, is the clear sparkle. This is going to add such lovely texture to it. I will show you in a minute in a little close-up. It's hard to show on the leaves on camera because they are so detailed, but I did add a little bit in the corner of a piece of gold cardstock. Can you see there? That's the mirror shiny, and that corner is where I heat embossed it with the clear sparkle embossing powder. It doesn't only add the sparkle to it from the glitter in it, but also adds this lovely texture, like it almost feels like gritty. I absolutely love this technique. I never tried this before with the clear sparkle. I did use the clear gloss over mirror cardstock. I definitely will be coming back to use this again. So there's all the other leaves that I've already prepared and not be using them all on this piece of cardstock, but the rest can go into the decorating, or I will be putting them away into my wee box, and I'll come back to them later at some point. So I'm just arranging them, and I'm going to use my quick grab glue, and I will just glue all this down onto that piece of card. Once properly dried, I'm going to turn it onto the other side and cut away all the excess foliage from it, just using a pair of scissors. Once this is done, I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine with an embossing folder. I know, even more texture, but I just love how this is going to turn out. So this polka dot embossing folder, I'm making sure adding it at a bit of an angle. And now I'm left with this gorgeous, gorgeous background in there. And that didn't only add those polka dots in there, but also embedded the gold and the copper cardstock into that white one a little bit. It looks stunning, honestly. You must try this technique. It's amazing. So I used a bit of a spice marmalade just to add a little bit of a color to the edges and to the raised polka dots on it. So this is background number 2 ready. For the third card base, I took out an extra mat from my drawer. Didn't want to get the ink all over the glass mat and all over the ready-made project. So I'm just going to lay some Distress Oxide inks on this. I'm going with mustard seed, spice marmalade, and candied apple. This technique was inspired by Lou Collins. She done this in one of her latest videos, and I love the technique. I've seen this being done before, but never with Distress Oxide inks, so I decided to give it a go. That black lid is just a little lid of one of my shimmer powders, and I'm just making sure that I'm picking up more than one colors than each goes. So for this first one, I'm using yellow and red, and as I'm pressing it down onto my watercolor piece of cardstock, I'm twisting it just ever so slightly to make sure that I get a real good impression in there. With the second one, I used just some yellow and orange, and again picked up some red one for that third bubble in there. Taking my watercolor brush, I'm just going to add a little bit of a water inside of those bubbles, pulling the color all inside of it. Now, because my watercolor piece of cardstock is textured, of course it bleeds out a little bit, but I do like that look about it. I will show you a comparison on a smooth piece of cardstock compared to this textured one. I definitely prefer this one. So now if you feel that there's not enough color on the lines in there to pull in inside of the bubble, just pick up some more color from your mat, just like I done in here. And if it's too much, just dilute it with some water again. There's so many ways that you can play with this. It really is so amazing technique. I love these bubbles. I might just come back and do something else with these bubbles because I love them, and I do have a few ideas on what way I could use these. So again, doing the same thing to that third bubble in there, making sure I add enough water. You can keep these more subtle, or you can add more colors to them, just whichever way you prefer. So this is the textured piece of cardstock, and this here was done on smooth. I don't know, I definitely prefer on the textured one in there. So this one is a smooth again, and I already have prepared the full background on a textured cardstock before, which is already dry, because this will take a little while to dry. So I'm just going to work on that cardstock that I had already previously prepared. And this is on the textured cardstock. The textured one, by the way, is from Crafter's Companion, while the smooth one that I use, which I do prefer for most techniques, is from Craft Stash. But for this technique in here, I don't know why. It's just my personal choice. I definitely preferred the one that had slightly more texture. And just a little while ago there, you saw me showing all the different sizes of lids I used to create the different sizes of bubbles. The small one was of a glue pen, the larger one was of an old medication bottle, so you can use whatever you have in your stash. Now that the backgrounds are all ready and prepared, it's time to decorating them. I'm going to work on the yellow one first. You can see how overcluttered it looks when I add some elements, so I decided to tone the background down a bit with a piece of vellum, which I've cut to the same size as the card is, 2.5 by 3.5 inches. This is a technique that I use a lot in my card making. I love using vellum to tone the background down a bit. So in here I'm just adding a few little elements just to see where my sentiment should be stacked. stamped, which I will be stamping on top of the vellum using my stamping platform. The embossing powder that I will heat emboss this with is the Gold Rich Embossing Powder by Wow. To adhere this piece of vellum onto my cardstock, I'm going to run a little piece of double-sided tape alongside the bottom of the vellum. I know that I will be covering up that part, and some dry, clear, quick grab, very strong glue on behind the word autumn, and I know that this will be enough to hold this in place. And from here on, it's time to decorate in, arranging all the lovely elements I watercolored in previously, and also some of the gold leaves that I die cut using the dies from the Papercraft Society box. And this took me the longest, especially on this first card. I was going for some real nice arrangement that I could use across all three little cards. I was going for showing the abundance of autumn, not only in colors, but also in produce. And I really think that I managed to do it well, just as I imagined. I'm just going to let you watch a little bit of me decorating, mind changing along the way, and trying to pick some rhinestones at the end, and then I will be back to show you the end result. And again, it took me the longest time to decide which rhinestones to use, but these light green ones matched perfectly the green color of the stamped leaf in the background on the yellow cardstock. Doesn't show much here on camera, but it is there. It's a lovely subtle green that we were stamping earlier on, and I thought these matched it perfectly. So here's a little close-up of the first card, and I was very excited now to get onto the second one, which I will be using this background for, the one that we created the bubbles on. I wanted to add a little bit of a color to the edges of this card, and first I was going to use spice marmalade, but then as I was looking at it, I thought it was too subtle compared to the bubbles in there, or the color of the bubbles that I used. So I decided to try a little bit of a candied apple, and this is what I'm gonna come in with, and I'm going to add just light, a subtle color onto the edges. But later on I will come back and I will add a little bit more of the orange as well, just to match it a bit more to the decorations. The red matched more of the bubbles, but once I start decorating and all, it was missing a little bit of an orange there as well. So you will see me come back and fix that up later a bit. The theme for this card was inspired by the stamp set from the Papercraft magazine and this lovely teacup stamp in it. I didn't want to use this though. I wanted to use my stitched die set by Longphone, which I was sent by Practical Publishing for winning their competition earlier on this year. And I've cut it out from orange cardstock as well as some of the leftovers of the mini album I shared earlier on a week ago maybe. And here I'm coming back with more of the orange ink to the edges to match a little bit more to that teacup as well. And from here it decided me again such a long time to decide what way to decorate it, because I'm working on such a little area and I have so much that I want to fit in there. It's just taking me a little time to get used to. Normally I make large cards, this is not it. So finally I decide to stamp it onto the right upper corner using my stamping platform, and watch what happens. So the stamp isn't very sticky and there's some leftover residue ink. Can you see it fell back onto my cardstock? I must have used this stamp before. I didn't clean it off very well, so there's a bit of a black mark just above spice. and below the writing as well. I thought I'd get away with it, but I didn't like it at the end. So off camera here, me starting it, I created a brand new background. Fast forward to the stamping bit. I'm going to use my acrylic block this time. I'm just going to stamp it onto that top corner. And instead of the clear embossing powder, I decided to change it to the gold one. So the same one I used on my previous little card. And this stamp says pumpkin, spice, and all things nice. So it just goes very well with the teacup theme, I thought. So a big cleanup on the mat, and now I'm just going to decorate it. And again, I'm going to put this on high speed. For this one, I will be using some foam pads as well, just to add a little bit of an extra dimension, layering up the teacup in here, and then I'm going to arrange some of the lovely produce again inside the teacup, beside the teacup. You'll see it will look absolutely perfect. I think this one is my favorite, maybe. I don't know. I love them all. For a bit of bling, I decided to go with the darker green rhinestones with this one, but because there's so much more added dimension and a lot more elements on this card than there was on the first one, I only decided to add 3 rhinestones. I think it finished it off perfectly. So here's the final look of the completed card. Just how cute it is! So excited! For the first 2 cards, I had a plan, a kind of an idea in my head what way I was going to decorate them. For the third one, I had no idea at all. I was winging it completely. So I went back to the stamp set from the Simply Cards and Papercraft magazine, and I chose out the one that said Grateful, Thankful, Blessed. Now, I was going to stamp this, but I was only going to use the word grateful. So once I stamp and heat emboss this, again using the same gold embossing powder on a piece of scrap white heavyweight cardstock in here, then I am going to fussy cut the word grateful out of this. I didn't even stamp it all, I just stamped the bit that I knew I was going to need in here. Using my fussy cutting scissors, I'm just following the line and the shape of those letters to cut out this sentiment. I will add a little bit of a spice marmalade distress oxiding to this, just for a bit of a color, but later on I will come back to define those edges a little bit even more. Now watch what happened to this already gorgeous background as it was. When I sent it through the die cutting machine with the polka dot embossing folder, I hadn't noticed this right away. But look, where all those erased dots are, it removed the embossing powder on those leaves. So kind of stretching the fibers of the paper, it removed all that excess embossing powder that was sitting on top of those dots and left parts of these leaves shiny, while the others have that gritty texture from the glitter embossing powder on them. Such a lovely surprise. I got so excited. This is such a lovely technique. There's a few techniques in one that you could already use, and I think it would work very, very well for all different mixed media projects. So in here, I'm just arranging what to add where. I decided to not add any more golden leaves to this one. Obviously, it doesn't need it. There's so much gold and rose gold or copper even going on in here. Now you can see me dipping just the very edges of this sentiment into the candied apple. It will define the sentiment and just lift it away from that background a little bit more. I also added foam pad behind the sentiment just to give it a little bit of a more definition, kind of lift it away from the background. So now I'm just looking how the three look together in there, and I really like this arrangement. So again, I will just let you watch me arranging, decorating, gluing everything down, and then I will be back to show you the end result. And also, because there's so much texture going on that background, I decided to use my hot glue gun to attach all these elements onto the little cup. For the rhinestones, I decided to go with the red ones for this card, and here's a final close-up look of the finished card. I really love these stamps, such gorgeous, cute elements. So here's the three cards beside each other. The first one says Autumn Blessings, the second one Pumpkin Spice and All Things Nice, and the third one Grateful. Which one is your favorite? I really think I managed to do what I set out myself to do, to have some matching cards showing off color and abundance that we see in autumn. Also to show you a couple of different, new to me anyway, techniques which you can incorporate in your card making. I will be making a folder for these ones to go in. I will share that. I'm not sure will it be a picture or a video. I'm kind of struggling for space in my phone, so I have to pick and choose what I can record and when. It's a bit of a learning curve, but I'm getting there. I really hope you enjoy my videos, and if you did enjoy today's tutorial, please give me the thumbs up, and if you haven't yet done so, consider subscribing to my channel, for I have some more amazing videos coming up in the future, and especially coming up to Christmas. I am very excited to see you the next time with a lovely project. Until then, bye!